Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Here Be Dragons. I'm your host, as always, Stephen Stark, and of course, my trusty co-host, partner in crime, John Webster from John Webster Film.
Burn, baby, burn.
Burn, baby, burn. Nessie's not here this week. You know, she's a respiratory therapist, and she's quite busy in the world, helping keep people alive. So, Nessie, we love you. Wish you could be here. She'll be back next week, though. So, yeah, here we are to talk about The Dark Knight Rises. Right? Isn't that the one we're talking about?
No.
No?
Are you trying to drive me crazy, Stephen?
Just a little bit. No. Batman Returns, the second Tim Burton / Michael Keaton Batman film.
Like, you've already driven me crazy once today by folks, originally in the description, if you're looking below the video, it says that it was the last good Batman film until the Christopher Nolan trilogy. Stephen originally put until the Zack Snyder trilogy, and I was like,
I have no idea. I have no idea what you're talking about. I made no such error when I originally made the stream. I swear to you. Unless you took a screenshot, you can't prove it.
Okay, this is true. And I did not. So, so believe what you want, folks.
But anyway, yeah. Batman Returns. Now, we did the original Tim Burton, Michael Keaton Batman film actually a long time ago now.
Yeah.
Like, I want to say almost a year ago.
Yeah. And it's funny because I actually assumed that I would have, I assumed that I would have covered this on my channel by now, but it just hasn't materialized yet. It probably will, even though we're doing it here, because this is like cards on the table. This is my favorite comic book film of all time.
This one?
Yeah.
I mean, okay. Great. It is not my favorite comic book film of all time.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't really surprise me, but that's okay. There's a lot of them, so But I'm just very much a fan of the peculiar style of Tim Burton, and this is basically, if the first Batman was Tim Burton sort of adapting his style to doing a Batman film, this film was sort of adapting Batman to fit a Tim Burton movie. And that's what I love so much about it. It's completely like batshit crazy. It
is. And what better movie to be batshit crazy than this one? And yeah. So I had not seen this film in a long, long time. I've said it before, Michael Keaton is my Batman. I really love that first one.
Yeah.
This movie, okay, all of my cards on the table, this movie was way more ridiculous than I remember it being. Like, way more ridiculous. But, once I kind of like went, oh, okay, that's what this is. It's still a lot of fun.
I mean, it's like when the climax of the film has a bunch of penguins just walking around with like rockets on their back. You got to turn yourself over to this is patently a ridiculous, a loony Tim Burton film, and I love it for that reason. But yeah, and the thing is, this is one of those movies that I still remember seeing in the theater, even though I was quite young when it came out. It came out in 92, so I guess I was 8 years old.
I was 17.
Yeah, and I in fact, what I remember is that the first theater I went to it to see with my friend Matt, and I think my mom was taking us, and I think the first theater we went to was sold out. And so we actually had to drive to another movie theater to actually catch it within the time frame that we were going to be out. So, the fact that I can remember that, it's funny to me. But not only is this like my favorite comic book movie of all time, this is really the film that sort of, and I know that there are certain people that this is going to horrify, maybe a certain gentleman on Twitter in particular, but this is the Batman film that kind of sets the tone for what Batman is to me.
Oh man.
Yeah. And like just the extreme, gothic vibes, the sort of ridiculousness of the, over the top nature of the characters, and that not just the Tim Burton style, but the Danny Elfman score, which, it shares in common with the first one. But with this one, Danny Elfman really gets to let loose, just sort of with the sort of operatic nature of the Penguin music and Catwoman's theme, especially when Selina is, comes back from being killed for the first time, and she's tearing apart her apartment and doing all that. It's some of my favorite film scoring ever. And yeah, I just, and when what's funny actually is the score sets so much of a tone in the opening minutes with Penguin, with the sort of children's choir and all that stuff, that when Penguin is dropped, into the river and, goes underneath, and the Batman theme starts to come in with the opening title, it's like, oh, that's right, this is a Batman movie.
Yeah.
Because it feels like such a full-on Tim Burton film, prior to that main title sequence, that it takes a minute for you to say, like, oh, this is existing in the same universe as the first film.
Give me a second. I see Sixto Sounds is in the chat, and buddy, I know you're one of the biggest Batman fans out there. If you wanted to, I don't know, jump on and talk about Batman with us today, I would totally send you a link. Just let me know.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on.
I know you may not want to get on camera and all that stuff, and I know not everybody likes that, but hey, if you wanted to. I also saw a couple of new names in the chat, so I wanted to just give a hearty HBD welcome to Greg or Craig, and also Garden Gnome 118. Thanks for stopping by, y'all.
Oh, that's
always
a shame.
nice to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying it looks like he doesn't have the.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, it's. So yeah, it's funny to hear you say that about you didn't. It was more. What was the words you used?
It's ridiculous.
Ridiculous. Yeah. I don't know. I can't argue against that, but it's it's just so much. It's just so much fun, and I get like. I get extreme joy out of the fact that this pissed off so many parents when it came out.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's a lot like sexier than I remember it being too.
Oh my God, on this viewing I caught a lot of innuendo. Some of it not so much innuendo, it's just
yeah, it's like several double entendres and quite a few single entendres, if you were.
Yeah. Just the fact that you've got, I did go ahead. I know the pics are usually from my channel, but I couldn't resist doing one picture because, let's face it, for the 8-year-old me, the big thing about this movie was absolutely Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman.
Yeah. Look, I was 17 when this movie came out. You can imagine what she did to me. Like, ladies in the chat, I respect you all deeply, but let's just take a moment to appreciate beauty, shall we?
I mean, that's like, there's a reason why like when you say Catwoman, you still always think of Michelle Pfeiffer. She
You're
was absolutely iconic. She is Catwoman. And
right.
And as an 8-year-old, I'll say that we'll just get this out of the way. I think she was probably doing things to me in my head that I wasn't aware was going on as an 8-year-old, which and probably explains a number of things, but we'll leave it at that.
Right.
But aside from all that, I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer is just she's fantastic. I mean, you can't imagine a better performance as
she can
as
really,
Catwoman.
She can really chew up the scenery, like acting when she wants to.
Yeah. The fact that she goes from, you know, a quote unquote sort of normal secretary, this typical woman in the beginning, who's shy, reserved, and then and then does that complete 180, and then you see where she goes throughout the rest of the film. Then that scene at the ball when she whips out the gun and starts just, doing like maniacal laughter while she's dancing with Bruce and stuff. And that she sells both sides of that character so convincingly well. It's amazing what she's able to pull off.
Well, really, she plays almost 4 different characters throughout the course of the film.
Yeah.
She plays the sort of mousy, subdued, demure secretary at the beginning, and then almost a dual character of the Catwoman and this sort of like self-actualized Selena Kyle in the second act. And by the third act, those 2 personalities come crashing together.
Yeah.
And she pulls it all off so well, all of those characters so convincingly. She is the highlight of the film for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I love everything about the movie, but this was basically her film. She owned it. But wonderfully enough, the great thing about this movie is, as much as it is, she does kind of take control of the film, it's one of the few examples of the quote unquote comic book film, or I guess any type of film, where you've got multiple sort of protagonists / villains who are equally balanced, and the story actually works. So often we hear about, okay, you had 2 villains in this movie and one of them got shortchanged, and they weren't really given their, they weren't able to realize their full potential story-wise. And that is not a problem with this film. It is like the sort of perfect example of how you juggle in these different characters. I mean, arguably Batman is the one who gets the short. But I get that's kind of true of the first film as well, where Joker is kind of, takes the limelight. I think Tim Burton very much loves the villains more than he loves Batman. But even so, I don't think. I think that's only necessarily the case for this film if you are looking at it as Batman should have the most focus. I actually think that there's pretty balanced focus between the sort of 3 characters of Batman, Penguin, and Catwoman. If you look at them as sort of equal, sort of protagonists of the story. And
you got to throw some Walken in there too, because he gets plenty of screen time. And I would say
he does.
I agree with your overall assessment, though. Like, if anybody got shortchanged, it is in fact Batman.
Yeah. And I don't want to leave Christopher Walken out, because in many respects he is the quote unquote villain,
the real bad guy.
Yeah. He's the most monstrous, I think. And yeah, he's brilliant. And that's another thing. It's like, you talked about this movie being ridiculous. Like, the moment he pops up on screen, he's got his like wild hair and he's Christopher Walken. So it's just there's something so wonderfully absurd about the way Tim Burton portrays his characters and the villains. And
well, like only Tim Burton can give us a circus gang, and like nobody else would even try that. Well, they might try it, but like I think they would be less ridiculous about it, less campy, and that would take away from what is actually the soul of these two films together, especially.
Yeah, and I just want to really take a minute also to appreciate, like, we already talked about the first one, last time we did this, but it's easy to, I think, look at these films and, man, if only Tim Burton had been able to continue. But I've come to really be able to appreciate these two films as sort of companion pieces to each other and existing, onto themselves. And they are like I said before, they are kind of my Batman. I'd say my Batman is kind of that period of time of these films and Batman the Animated Series, which was inspired by the Tim Burton films. And so I really love that, I can't not throw in my physical media talk for the day, but these films were recently remastered in 4K Ultra HD. And similarly, the Batman the Animated Series was remastered for Blu-ray a few years ago. And it's really great to have all of these, sort of Tim Burton era things fully restored for home video. So that, if you're like me and you're not particularly fond of the sort of latest iterations of Batman, you have these, and they're very well preserved as sort of a time capsule of the period.
Right. Well, it's interesting you say that too. You mention it as a time capsule of the period. In 2021, if you want to look, what are some great all-time superhero movies? Like, you actually have quite a huge list of choices to choose from, and the type of story that they've told has truly evolved over time. But that really wasn't the case back when this film came out. There was a few Superman movies, and then there was one Batman movie prequel to this, and that was it. They were still sort of defining the film genre when this movie came out. Was it 92?
Yeah, this came out in 92, and the first one was 89. And so before that, you had Superman, and like, what else was there?
There really wasn't.
There wasn't much. And that just makes me think it's like what I wouldn't have given, back then for a, Batman versus Superman movie with these sort of versions of the characters. That would have been fun. But my time for, my fandom of those respective properties sort of, passed in terms of when they eventually got to that. But yeah, it was a whole different world. Like, now you got superhero movies every year from multiple, quote unquote cinematic universes. And not only that, because these properties are held under the same companies, there's, they're basically like the comic books now, where you've got crossovers between different characters and stuff like that. But back then, what's so unique about these movies is that they are their own unique worlds. Like, no other superhero movies, even DC movies, were like the Tim Burton Batman movies. And and what Richard Donner did with Superman was very unique to that, the on-screen version. And I think that's kind of, I don't want to push this point too much, because, if we're not careful, this will get into a larger discussion over, our disagreements about sort of modern superhero movies, but nowadays
we have our differences of opinion.
Yeah, but everything now is sort of, as far as like stuff with Marvel and then stuff with DC, it's all kind of under the same umbrella. So even if filmmakers are allowed to kind of stylistically do their own thing on a certain movie, it's still all kind of under the umbrella of the rest of that studio. And so there is a certain stylistic similarity, whereas back then a director could go completely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
As evidenced by these Tim Burton Batman movies. They're like, I don't think anybody could get away with doing something like this these days.
I wonder if this movie is as crazy as it is because of how successful the first one was. And they said, okay, Tim, you just go do your thing.
Yeah.
And he was like, great, I'm turning it all up to 11. We're going to have a guy on a unicycle with a machine gun.
And then, a penguin who's actually like
a penguin.
And I'm just thinking, like, I was watching this last night, and then there's the part where, he's at the gravesite of his parents, and he's all dressed up, and then you've got, Danny Elfman's music in the background, and then he's waddling towards the camera like a penguin. I'm just like, this is insane. It's beautiful and insane.
Yeah, so a few things that I had forgotten from my first watch. The first character to appear on screen is, I believe his name is Thomas Cobblepot, the father, played by Paul Rubens, who is he's one of my heroes, man. I grew up on Pee-wee's Playhouse and Pee-wee's Big Adventure and, all of that Pee-wee Herman crap. So, the man's not a great actor, let's be honest, but I still have a soft spot in my heart for him. He's great.
But the way that him and his wife just blankly play that, just like, oh no, the baby's eating the cat. They just sort of look at each other like, I'm sorry, it's just.
And you also
so
don't even see. There is a Bruce Wayne scene fairly early on, or not a Bruce Wayne. There's a Batman scene fairly early on, but it is the 35-minute mark before you see Bruce Wayne in this film.
Yeah.
And it's a full hour into it before there's a second Batman scene. So we were saying earlier, if anybody got shortchanged, it's Batman. And it might be because they had 3 different villains with complex stories that were going on.
And the thing is, especially, you probably have a debate as to, you can be a villain and a protagonist simultaneously. I think Penguin is more, you could more easily categorize him as a villain than Selena Kyle. I think she's an anti-hero and absolutely a protagonist in this. So in a lot of ways, the beginning of the film starts telling the story almost from her point of view at times, and but it's because Bruce Wayne is already established, so you don't have to really
we don't need to build the Batman as a character.
Yeah.
For sure. Which is why, we're not really talking about any other Batman films, but, if you want to contrast it to, say, the next Batman trilogy that came out, that's why people love The Dark Knight so much.
Yeah, because it's the film that deals the least with, actually with Bruce Wayne as a character. Because, so much of the focus is given over to Heath Ledger's Joker. Whereas I think Batman Begins is the film that really delved super deeply into Bruce Wayne, the character. And that's actually why I love it a lot. I love different films for different reasons. And
sure.
I've always really liked Batman Begins because of its focus on character. And Dark Knight is a basically an epic. Even at the time that it came out, I said it was like a crime epic, basically. You know, it was, it lived in a certain genre that, you know, it was it was the Batman universe's version of, you know, some crime epic like
like Godfather or something.
Yeah, or even God, why can't I think of the name of the movie of Heat? Something like Heat,
Okay.
you know, and yeah, and that's what I like. That was another thing good about Christopher Nolan's movies, which those also came out just before the cinematic universe was a thing. And so he still got to put his particular stamp on it, where it was very different from what had come before, but it was very unique to his style. And I think he got away with that just in time. But he also sort of set the stage for what came later tonally, whether you can argue whether that's a good thing or not, because I think the lesson there is you need to let give filmmakers room to be creative and to do their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I missed that soft jab at the MCU there. You'll answer for that after the stream, but I get what you're saying. Like, they're not beholden to anyone's vision but their own.
But okay, I'll say this as to sort of mend the fence a little bit. I think that with what we're watching right now, WandaVision is actually a really good example of what you do when creatively you let somebody do something outside of the box. And I think WandaVision is very much outside of the normal MCU box, because what are they doing with that show? It's basically a 9-hour series diving into a character's grief.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is not something they've gotten to do before.
Yeah, you're right. And as you say, you know, you can appreciate them for different reasons. Yeah. It takes the whole MCU to make a WandaVision.
Yeah, that's true.
But like a lot of other artists and filmmakers had to sacrifice parts of their vision to build that bigger whole. And that's not a good thing, and it's not a bad thing. It's just it's a choice that was made. And like, I can see the benefits of not trying to adhere to that, so that you can have the auteur director not hamstrung in any way. So I can absolutely appreciate it. But I mean, it's not going to change the fact that I prefer the MCU over like the more standalone ones. It feels like a grander, more epic story. But like, I still had a good time watching this film today.
Yeah.
And for those of you who want more WandaVision talk, just come back next week.
But yeah, I'm just this movie is. I think it's. I was going to say it's because I grew up on movies like this, but then so did you. So I think it's just at the end of the day, it comes down to different tastes, and I prefer this, way of things where it's sort of very unique entries into what the comic book story is, and I don't think that comic book. Yeah,
we'll get to it, buddy. We'll get to it.
I also think that one thing the MCU does really well, and this shouldn't. We'll dial back on the MCU talk in a second, because this is about Batman Returns. But I will say what they do really well is the fact that I know that a lot of comic book fans are very happy with the world that they get in those films and the way the characters are developed. Whereas with this film, I know a lot of Batman comic fans aren't happy with a lot of stuff in this movie, because it goes against what is typically said to be sort of the Batman story. But it's it's a different iteration of Batman, and I liked that it's the whole thing where Batman doesn't kill anybody, and that's and that's sort of thrown away within both of these films. The first Batman, and this one as well. And in the first one, he, you know, does do something that results in the Joker, you know, dying. And in this one, you know, he plants an explosive device on one of the bad guys, and then you get a grin from him, which I know a lot of people hate. I think it's within the story.
Burned at least 3 people alive.
Yeah. But I do also think that illustrates this idea of, you know, in this film, Tim Burton is illustrating, you know, if you're looking at Batman, Catwoman, and the Penguin, 3 very messed up people. And as, you know, Bruce even says, you know, late in the film, he says that Selina were the same, split right down the middle. I think you're looking at sort of 2 halves of Bruce Wayne himself, and then Batman, who, you know, is just sort of this sort of inner, you know, crazy side of Bruce that, you know, I love the line that Penguin says, "You're just jealous because I'm a real freak and you have to put on a mask," or something to that effect. And I think there's a certain truth to that with this version of Batman. But yeah, I don't know. I'm fine with it because, again, as horrifying as this may be to certain people, this was the Batman that I grew up seeing, so it never violated, you know, anything in that respect for me. And I just think that it's exciting to see different interpretations of a character.
Sure.
This doesn't diminish any other version of Batman. It just is what, especially since we've had so many on-screen versions of Batman since.
Well, he's such a popular character.
Yeah.
In general. And that might just be down to most of us have the most he's a superhero, but his superpower is I'm really smart and I'm really rich. Yeah. So we as an audience have a better chance of being him than we do, say, Superman or Wonder Woman. You know, we could never be that. But you put me behind a Batmobile, I can flip switches and blow up bad guys too. I promise you I can. So that makes him very relatable. And, you know, coming from a comic book origin and knowing what I know about your typical comic book reader, feeling like an intellectual and something of an outsider at the same time, Batman appeals to us on that level as well. He has to be separate from the world, but he uses his superior intellect in order to achieve his goals. So that's also very relatable to us, you know, people who consider ourselves to be somewhat intellectual, but also sort of socially awkward.
Yeah. And Batman is very socially awkward just because he's gone through a lot of trauma in his life. And so his disguise is pretending like, you know, he's not socially awkward. He's this, you know, supremely, you know, sort of sociable, outgoing, you know, rich guy, when really he's, you know, the brooding guy who's, you know, putting on a costume and fighting crime. So
yeah.
If he were himself in social situations, he'd be considered extraordinarily awkward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So let's talk about the movie specifically a little more. JP said more Catwoman talk, so I'm going to jump back to Selina Kyle. Like, okay, you know what? Everybody grab your drinks, get ready. Because, man, is this movie sexist and patriarchal at times. Drink. We mentioned the patriarchy, so you got to drink. That was like, I can understand appreciating the beauty of another human being. I really can. I do it. You do it. We all do it. But I gotta say, like, one of the things that left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth this go around was how objectified Michelle Pfeiffer was. I mean, she's putting that out there, and it's intentionally part of her character to sexualize herself. But like, dude, I don't need a horny penguin. I'm sorry. It was creepy, and I'm just like, tone it down, bro. Tone it down. Like,
but I mean, I'm not going to disregard that, but she also puts him in his place, which
that's true.
I mean, but that's again, like, I get that, but that's also part of what I enjoy about Danny DeVito's Penguin is that, like, I mean, the fact that this film is so sort of in your face about its, sort of sexuality, and the fact that these three characters are not only like, we talked about how they're sort of, messed up and, emotionally, they're going through a lot. And they're also, all three of them, very horny.
You're right. They are.
Which I think is just hilarious. And part of, but that also goes into what makes me happy about the way that this film was, sort of put out there and received as it was supposed to be. Batman's supposed to be kid friendly, and and this was like almost daring the parents to be enraged about this.
Right.
So I get what you're saying. I do, but I also appreciate the sort of audacity of just telling, this kind of story with these kinds of characters under the guise of a tentpole comic book movie.
Right. But I will say it was nice to have a character like the Catwoman who did own her sexuality and who was, I mean, it sort of took a pretty extreme set of circumstances, but she did become self-empowered and self-assured. And
I think that one of the most important things about the movie is, as far as the way it's portrayed, I think it's very important that this film ends with the fact that she, rejects Bruce's offer to be, basically, she paints the picture of, I would love to go live with you in your castle, and just like in a fairy tale, but that's not, but I don't think I could live with myself, is
right.
what she says. And so she makes that stand for herself. So I think that the final statement on the character is very powerful, and not, a necessarily a sexist one. You can make lots of arguments about that just with her outfit, but as far as the character itself and the decisions that she makes to stand on her own, I think that's a very important thing to appreciate about the way that the film ends.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it is her, she has agency.
Yeah.
She doesn't start the film with agency, but she ends the film with as much agency as she can, with all the agency, I guess. And I kind of appreciated the way, now nothing panned out from it, but they did end this film in such a way that she's out there and she could totally come back in some other film. Not that ever happened. Again, they went.
It's my favorite bit which actually I think was an insert that they actually had her pop up in the final shot.
JP, sorry, so good. Kate said she learned martial arts awfully quickly, and cat bites give you karate. Obviously, thank you for that, JP. Appreciate it.
I mean, well, yeah, I thought that was just generally accepted.
Right. She was bitten by a radioactive cat.
And I love that. I have a piece of art that highlights the "Hell Here," sign, and that's just, I love that. But yeah, I do love the fact that the film ends with her, popping up in frame. It made me really excited for the next movie, and then well, the rest is history.
Full disclosure, I do not hate the next Batman film in this series, but it is not good.
Well, here's the thing. I was only like 11 years old when it came out. So, and it was in the middle of the Jim Carrey craze. So I'll just say it, like, I loved the movie when I saw it as a kid. And so it's still kind of a guilty pleasure for me, but I'll acknowledge that it's not, it's certainly not what people want from Batman, I think. But yeah, full disclosure, I still have a soft spot for Batman Forever, but I think we can all agree that Batman and Robin is the worst pile of sludge ever created.
Yeah, Bat Nipples is not a great movie.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, hold on. Love Lissa says Halle Berry.
No, she didn't.
That is a woman in a badger costume. That is not a Catwoman movie. It's bad.
I don't even know what's being discussed here. I didn't see anything.
Right. Oh man. But I like, she is the star of this movie. You could call this, Catwoman Begins, if you really wanted to. Now, I think there are better iterations of the Catwoman, especially in the animated series.
Well, see, I actually see the version in the animated series as basically inspired by Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. I think she very much is, obviously not exactly the same, but yeah, it's. I think a lot of the animated series was kind of inspired by the Tim Burton films, but I think they went off in a new direction with it as well.
She's a little bit more sympathetic in some iterations. This character is a bit violent and a bit. One of the things I hated her saying, and it would not be said if they remade this film today, was when she sort of rescues the woman from being assaulted in the alleyway, and then she tells the woman, "You make it so easy, don't you?" And I'm like, come on now, let's not shame her for what she's wearing or what have you.
But and I'm not going to say that wouldn't be different, but the full line is, "You make it so easy, don't you? Always waiting for some Batman to come and save you." I think what she's saying there is that she's felt victimized and she doesn't want to be that anymore. Yeah. But that said, the line wouldn't be there if it was made today. I agree.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say this wasn't an early 90s film.
Right. If it is 30 years old or 29 years old at this point,
which, by the way, I can't believe it's that old. Or I should more properly say, I can't believe I'm that old.
Right.
Because it's like, how did this movie become almost 30 years old?
Thank you, Aemy. We're trying. We're not perfect, we're trying.
Even me, I feel like I'm, one step away from being canceled with some of the stuff I'm saying. I'm trying to do my best, though.
I can still enjoy it, and I can still go, okay, it's a product of its time. I know what the 90s was like. I'm not going to beat it over the head for its shortcomings, looking at it through the lens that I do today, where I'm much more mature and I'm much more worldly than I was at 17 years old. And the whole world has moved on. But we move on by pointing at these things and saying, this is not who we are anymore. And then I go, okay, it's a product of its era. This is not who we are anymore. Let me roll my eyes and move on.
And also, I think it's an important thing to know too. Everything's sort of, unfortunately, especially if you look at the spirit of time, everything was sort of a process of, you had Kim Basinger playing a character in the first film that wasn't really given much to do. And I think that this film improved in that area by creating such a great, character in Selena Kyle, but they still had a ways to go. And so I do think, again, this is a movie that's almost 30 years old. I think we've made a lot of progress in that regard. But that said, even if things weren't done perfectly, she's still one of my absolute favorite, female characters I think that's ever been put on screen.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can nitpick it. A lot of it comes down to like the sensibilities of that day and age, and I'll point at them and say, nope, don't like that. But she is an empowered woman with agency by the time we get into the meat of the film. And it doesn't shy away from showing her the before that, which is saying, look, this is the way it is in corporate America, where I have a thought, I have a question. They never asked what it is. They refer to her in a very dehumanizing way by saying something to the effect of, she's not properly housebroken yet. She's left to stand there awkwardly while they all laugh and then walk out of the room and leave her behind to clean up. So, and I think you and I both know, John, that's how it is in the corporate world, or at least, and probably still is to a large degree today, but much more so even in the 90s. So it doesn't blink from that, and it does elevate her to a place where she does have agency. She does make decisions for herself, and she does get to play this sort of middle ground between Batman and Shrek and Penguin. She's really the only character that has like meaningful scenes with all the other characters.
Yeah.
So as again, we've said it a few times already. This really is her film.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying about that scene in the beginning and the in the boardroom, what she has to endure, with Shrek and the rest of the men in there, it gives me great pleasure that the film ends with her, electrocuting Shrek. There's, a lot of gratification to come from that first point in the movie to the fact that she's the one who gets to pay him back for, like from a story point of view, it's for killing her. But, from, I feel like he's got that coming just from the way he talks to her.
Yeah. And what a badass way to like close out her character in the film. When like, you killed me, Penguin killed me, Batman killed me, 6 lives left. Gets shot 4 times and is like, I still got a spare, and fries him. And what a great reveal when Bruce or Batman is digging through the rubble and he comes across a totally burned up Shrek, black, face all blackened and shriveled and smoking, and just like, whoa, I was not expecting that in a family-friendly Batman film.
Oh my, but okay, there's a line a little bit earlier in the film which sort of points to that notion too about what should or shouldn't be in a family-friendly film. It's when Penguin is outlining his plan for the firstborn of Gotham, and one of his henchmen says, Penguin murdering children in their sleep, isn't that a little? and then he shoots him.
No, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Good line. Fun line.
It's like, this is the Batman film that's talking about, murdering children as they sleep. It's just, oh my God, this is such an insane movie.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. Love Lissa. I love your idea. Batman should do the same thing Burton should do the same thing he did with Batman with the He-Man franchise. You know what? I would love to see this they're fan casting He-Man heroes. Hot take: Tim Burton is past his prime. I know, not everybody wants to.
Well, people were saying that about 10 or so years ago, and then he came out with Sweeney Todd, which in my opinion is one of his best. I know not everybody may agree, but so I still think he's got some tricks up his sleeve, so I wouldn't count him out just yet. I think with Sweeney Todd, it was I think my mom and I may have been the only people who saw that at our showing and totally got it, because we were cracking up at the insanely morbid end of that movie, and everybody else in the theater was looking at us like we were crazy.
Well, but, both are potentially true.
Yeah.
Like, you can still be crazy. Like, you kind of almost have to be. Now, I do like Tim Burton, but Sweeney Todd was 13 years ago, and I don't know that he's done anything since then that I have really enjoyed all that much. So, and your mileage may vary. I'm not trying to crap on anybody. I did like Sweeney Todd a lot. I mean, I'm a musicals guy anyway, so that shouldn't surprise anyone. But I think that's the last good film he did, and I just looked, it came out in 2007. So, I stand by my statement earlier, but I'm not going to hate on him. I think Spielberg is my favorite director of all time, and he's past his prime too. You get to a point where your vision isn't the new thing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, basically my favorite filmmakers are allowed to get past their prime because they've made films that I adore, and so, it happens. It's it doesn't change the fact that, Tim Burton made some of my absolute favorite films of all time, this one included. And so, I'm fine with it. And, it is what it is.
It is, in fact. So, again, I'm not trying to crap on Tim Burton. He's done some of my favorite films of all time. We over on your channel, we did that discussion about oh, come on, brain, The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I love that movie. And I can look at Edward Scissorhands and Beetlejuice and things like that, and I love those movies. And they've got his fingerprints all over them.
And that's the thing. This was that era. Tim Burton was, making all of these great films. So, yeah.
I'm getting myself in trouble with
I tried to fight back a little bit, guys, but I gotta let Steven be Steven. But no, he was just making hit after hit, and so when it did come time to doing the sequel in the studio, it was you can just do you, Tim, and boy did he. And I love the fact that he just threw everything into this that he wanted to do. The consequences be damned, because the studio got so scared after this came out. There's a reason why we ended up with Batman Forever, out of this. And, but I love that. That's if you have to risk, losing, a potential sequel or, a future franchise to make, a piece of art that's completely, totally you, and you can get the studio to finance it and you can get away with it, then that's absolutely brilliant. And just everything about this, I know that they were horrified when, because they were thinking about the marketability with McDonald's Happy Meals and stuff. How do they make toys out of these characters? Because, you've got for a bunch of the film, Penguin has blood spewing out of his mouth. And we haven't talked about Danny DeVito as much
Yeah, I'm kind of like we're almost to the midway point, and I'm kind of waiting to jump in
Okay, all
because
right.
it's going to be a whole big thing. Once we start talking about Penguin, we're not going to be able to stop talking about Penguin. So, any other thoughts on say Catwoman or Burton as a filmmaker in general about this?
Just again, I can't stop singing my praises for Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. You know, talking again about the animated series iteration of this character. You know, there's a whole reason that despite the way that the show was produced, like the order of episodes, the first episode of Batman the animated series to air was part one of The Cat and the Claw, which was Catwoman's introductory episode. The episode starts off with her climbing up a wall and like breaking in to steal some jewelry, and that was not supposed to be the first episode. The first produced episode of Batman the Animated Series is the I forget what it's called, but it's the Man Bat episode. And that's the actual pilot. And the way they were doing it was first they aired The Cat and the Claw on I think it was this on a Saturday, like for the Saturday morning, cartoons or something. And I think then it was the following night as like a primetime event, they aired the Man Bat episode. So the whole reason, though, why they aired the Catwoman episode first was because the character was so popular through Batman Returns. And so I always found it interesting that sort of impacted what episode they launched the series with. And that's why it was funny when the DVDs came out and they had all the episodes in the proper production order. I was like, this doesn't feel right. I feel like the show started off differently than this, and I had to read up on it to remind myself that's how they did it. But yeah, just an interesting bit of history for that show as to why they started with that episode. And yeah, it's I just and side notes, we're talking about the movie, but man, I love that series so much. I think at some point we have to do some kind of discussion about Batman the Animated Series, because I actually think that that's probably the best on-screen representation of the character of Batman. I'd rate that above any of the live-action films.
Okay. We'll see if I can get around to watching that again. It's been so, and Taker is right.
And yeah, Mark Hamill. Nobody beats Mark Hamill as the Joker. Sorry.
But I do really enjoy this question. Which DC character who hasn't had a movie or series do you personally feel truly deserves one? Like one focused on them. Batman villain. I don't know. Batman's Rogues Gallery is just so weird that most Batman movies are movies about the villains. Which, okay, but that's not what you asked. DC character who hasn't had.
Yeah, I wouldn't be very helpful with the DC character thing, because pretty much all the characters I know about them because they've been on screen. Because I'm not as much of a comic reader as I am, a comic adaptation viewer. But if we were talking about like a Batman villains, I would say the one that I still want to be done truly right is Mr. Freeze.
Meet you.
No. Get rid of that shit. No, like the Batman the Animated Series iteration of the character where when they were originally talking about Mr. Freeze for one of the films that it turned into the disaster that is Batman and Robin. Like, I can tell you something, Arnold Schwarzenegger was never even remotely close to my list of people for that. I remember back in the day really wanting Patrick Stewart to play Mr. Freeze.
I'll tell you who I would have a series. And I only know them because I watched that old Justice League cartoon from the early 80s. We need a Wonder Twins film Wonder Twin powers activate. Do you even know what that is, John?
I mean, I've heard of them, but I don't think I've ever actually seen anything with them.
Yeah. So they were like weird alien twins, and if they touched if they did a fist bump, she could turn into, I think she could turn into any animal, and he could turn into basically water, like a bucket of water or ice cubes or something. Not the greatest powers, and they had this weird monkey that hung out with them. Anyway, that's what I want. Wonder Twins. Anyone else remember the Wonder Twins? Wonder Twin powers activate. And then, Mom, have a good time. Bring me some ribs back. Okay.
So you can admit it, Steven. You'd rather be having ribs right now.
No. This is so much fun. Okay, I'm glad. Fattest Leech says yes, she remembers them. Thank you. I'm not the only one. I'm not having some sort of like hallucination that they're not real. Anyway.
It was the Super Friends.
Okay, thank you. Neil just said it was the Super Friends through the door. You're right. It was the Super Friends, not the Justice League. Anyway, I digress. We've gone on for an hour. That means it's time for the mid-roll now. So we're going to have a little brief break. Then we'll come back and talk more about Batman Returns. So, everyone who's here, thank you for being here live. We really appreciate it. It's always, if you're watching after the fact, we appreciate you too, just maybe not quite as much. We always like our live viewers just a little bit better. So if you want to be liked better, come watch live next time. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. John and I will always give you our honest takes. Nessie will as well when she's here, and she'll be back next week to talk about the last 3 episodes of WandaVision. That's what we'll be covering a week from today. That show has been really, really, really good, and I can't wait for the last episode to come out and for us to be able to talk about the story as a whole.
Let me tell you, Stephen, I have absolutely adored this show. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to have this final discussion, but I'm going to have to. I've already settled on the fact that I'm going to have to watch the last episode the second it comes out because I'm terrified that I'm going to get content previews for it.
Yeah. Hey, I do the same thing. I don't work most Fridays, so I wake up and I put on coffee and go watch WandaVision. So yeah, join us next week. We'll be covering the whole season. Now we've already looked at the first 3 and the middle 3 episodes, so ostensibly it'll be about the last 3, but we will be covering the whole season. Let's be real. Nessie will be back for that one, so Big Sis will be in the house again, and we'll see if we can't get another good guest or 2 to join us. We were supposed to have a guest today for this conversation, but unfortunately they had to pull out at the last minute. Life gets in the way sometimes, but yeah. Anyway, we're making it happen, just you and me, John.
Yeah.
And I will, gotta make sure we shout out our patrons because we love those guys. Our Patreon High Council consists of Lord John Bronsteen the Wise, who I think was on our Batman discussion almost a year ago when we discussed the first film in this series. Bronte was on that. That's Lord John Bronsteen the Wise.
If he had been on today, I'd be hearing a lot about Batman's, killing of people.
Right.
I know that.
But lest I forget, we also got Sixto Sounds, aka JP the Axe Grinder, who was in the chat until about 10 minutes ago and had to go to work, I think. But we love you, man. And of course, ridiculous Ed Tollett, this guy right here, our alpha patron. You are the man, sir. We love you very much. Thank you, guys. And our High Council is supported by the lords and ladies of the realm, including Aemy Blackfyre, lover of poles, and Lady Leaf Underhill, both of whom are in the chat right now. Love you guys. Thanks for the support. We love you as always. John. what do you got coming up?
Yes.
Things are different over there at John Webster Film, so I don't even know what to expect. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a couple things going on. First of all, the next time that we're back on with an episode, we won't be a live stream. We're Aemy and I transitioning over doing a podcast, which will still be available in video format over on John Webster Film. But we're going to be going live with a podcast, the Cinematic Realms podcast, which will be available on all the usual places like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, all that stuff. Thing is, we're actually going to be a bit more delayed in starting it up. It was supposed to start this weekend, but the thing is, I've admittedly been a little overwhelmed lately and feeling a touch burnt out. So I talked to Aemy and we actually decided to go ahead and take a break for a couple of weeks, just to kind of refresh. And so that way, when we start up, I think we'll be in a better place. And so for now, things are on hold just for a couple of weeks. But when we start back up, we'll have an introductory episode for you, followed up by our coverage of The Wizard of Oz. So again, I apologize for the wait, but I think we'll be in a better position once we start up again.
Well, I'm just looking forward to getting back to it, John. I really love what you guys do over there on Jawoof.
Thank you.
And I know Nessie's got something coming up soon, too. Is it Bleep Ahoy?
Yeah, Bleep Ahoy. I know because I've made the graphic for her.
So. Okay, great. Yeah, she's going to be discussing like women in sailing culture and the myths surrounding that with Kelly, Jaded Redhead, another dear friend of our channel. So go check out Nessie. She'll plug it next week too, I'm sure. So yeah, lots of great content to look forward to. Not only on Here Be Dragons, but Jawoof when you get back to it, and the Unspun Yarn coming up real soon. Oh, also.
But by the way, actually, one thing I do want to mention, because Aemy and I both decided to sort of just be out front about this, even though we've sort of had this with our live streams on the John Webster Film channel, where we've had, these particular streams under a certain, sort of subtitle. We really are embracing our Kira Knightley coverage for Cinematic Realms. It's actually going to be a sub-series of our podcast called, and we can thank Yogi for this, it's going to be called The Nightly Hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, so we're going to be starting off, actually, after we did the Wizard of Oz video and podcast, the next one will be Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, which we're actually going to have Lady Triple on for. So that'll be a lot of fun. And if you want to, hear more about the Nightly Hour, you can follow us, the Knights of Kira, on these platforms. We're really leaning into it, folks. We're going to be shameless about this. So go ahead and follow any of those links. We're starting to get a lot of Instagram followers, which I think is hilarious. So go ahead and check us out. All right, that's shameless me plugging the Knights of Kira.
Okay, so I've got two things, and I'm going to get the first one out real quick. This coming Friday, March 5th, I think it's 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to have to get, I'll post it out on Twitter and put it in our Slack group later when I know for sure exactly. But I will be on Geeksterelia to talk with Cecilia about seasons 4 and 5 of The Expanse. She finally finished and caught up, and she's itching to talk about it. And, you guys know me. I will talk about The Expanse. All you got to do is ask.
Do you like The Expanse, Steven?
I do. I've heard I like it. It's okay. And that's this coming Friday, March 5th. Also, a few of you have said to me, Steven, what happened to the gaming streams that you used to do? We need to watch you play more Baldur's Gate 3. And I agree. That does need to happen. Um, and I'm going to discuss this more at length, probably in the HBD Slack group. Which, by the way, anybody who's not in the HBD Slack group and wants to be, all you got to do is like DM me on Twitter with your email address, and I'll get you in there. Everybody's welcome. Just don't be an asshole. But I am going to get back to it. The problem is because the game is still early access and they're constantly updating it, my save game is broken. I cannot continue the one I was playing before, so I would have to start completely over. And yeah, you say more Froda. We'd either have to rebuild Froda or make a whole new character, unfortunately. So, and I loved Froda. She was a great character. But there's some new stuff in the game, including the Druid class, which looks like it could be a lot of fun. Anyway, we'll discuss that, but I will be getting back to doing that. My intention is to do some tomorrow evening. To do some gameplay tomorrow evening. I will discuss with the Slack group after the stream. Anyway, that's it. I don't have anything else. John, is that everything for you?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, great. So, Penguin, Danny DeVito.
This movie has him biting somebody's nose and having it gush blood. Just, oh my God, it's crazy. And I can, like, we're not going to, do the political thing on this, but he runs for mayor and he's propped up as a candidate and he's a completely disgusting guy. I mean, make your own connections.
And he's got that like charming thing he tries to say, and yeah. He's definitely I'm gonna make an off-color joke at Catwoman's expense. He definitely wanted to grab her by the pussy. Again, Thirsty Penguin is not something I really wanted.
Yeah.
But we got it. And he was directed to do it. And let's, if you want a creepy villain, we got one. We got one for you, and he's called Penguin. Danny DeVito actually really did a great job portraying the character they wanted him to portray. Down to the grunting and squawking, honking mannerisms, the penguin noises and the waddle and the
say what you want. I know there's people who don't necessarily like this iteration of Penguin, and and then there's certain people who would have preferred if the movie was just all Catwoman instead of Penguin. But say any of that you want, but Danny DeVito played the hell out of the character that was written for this movie. He's absolutely phenomenal. And
well, the man is brilliant.
Yeah.
He's never been bad in anything.
Yeah. Just the opening sequence he's in with Christopher Walken. Greater cred, you make a good point. I apologize to the Penguin for the comparison.
Right. He didn't do that.
Yeah. But just his scene with Christopher Walken, that, towards the beginning of the film, just, the way he's going through all that and he's, digging out the, everything. He's like, what about Fred's hand? And again, that's going back to the Tim Burton of it all. It's he whips out, a disembodied dead hand. And when he goes to shake Christopher Walken's, he shoves that in his hand and just leaves it hanging there.
Good stuff.
I mean, that's the thing. I think why I enjoy this movie so much. It's other people look at this stuff and they're disgusted by it, and I just start cracking up.
It's so ridiculous. We said this before. The Penguin is such a ridiculous character. He's got are those freaking penguins with freaking rockets attached to their freaking backs? He's practically a Dr. Evil style character.
And like, he's making this big speech to all of them at the end of the movie before he sends them out. It's just, it's like, and you're almost drawn into like the sort of, sort of operatic drama of it all until you actually see them start to march out, and then you're like, oh, that's right. They're little penguins with rockets. It's
because reasons.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just losing it over here.
The thing is, he never loses that penguininess. Like, if you bring him a raw fish, dude, he'll do whatever you want.
Like, and that is so disgusting. Just watching him with, that raw fish
and stuff falling out of his mouth.
And it's the fact that, like, doesn't matter how he looks, how insane and disgusting that looks. He's being presented in that moment as a mayoral candidate. And, he's got his whole team just clapping. Again, bring to mind anything? But yeah, it's so disgusting, but so... And yeah, and the way, and then the penguins carrying him...
like pallbearer.
Yeah, into the water. It's great. Oh my god.
But it's interesting. Okay, I'm going to be real for a minute.
Yeah.
He has a plan pretty early on to kidnap all the firstborn sons of Gotham in order, to get back at his dead parents or whatever. Like, I don't really understand his motivation to do that, but okay. But he is kind of dissuaded from that along the way because of this adoration he begins to get.
Yeah, and he's being manipulated by...
and he's being manipulated by Shrek.
Yeah.
And it really actually does sort of change his outlook for a while. Of course, like one bad soundbite and everybody turns on him, which
is the least believable part of this whole movie.
I agree. But penguins with rocket launchers was not the least.
No, yeah.
It was the fact that this whole crowd loves him, and then a couple of sound bites later, and they're literally booing him. But
I actually think if you were looking looking at it through a realistic lens, he could have recovered from that, not for the fact that he decides to then just start, firing at the crowd. I think that's the point of no return. I think, doing a little spin, it would have been fine. They would have been forgotten about a day later.
Yeah, but machine gunning your supporters, not the way to win hearts and minds.
Yeah. But yeah, I just love the way he completely throws himself into this performance. Just everything from... he's a giant penguin, and he totally,
he really is just a giant penguin.
Just the way he uses his little fins and can
you imagine what a pain in the butt that would be from the actor's point of view? Because let's face it, Danny DeVito was already a huge actor by the time this film came out. Like, he did not have to stoop to anything. This was but I don't know. It seemed to me like, as ridiculous as it was, he was really having a good time with it.
Yeah, I was.
Did you get that feeling that like Danny DeVito was actually really enjoying himself making this film, despite the limitations of the giant prosthetic nose and the special gloves he had to wear and all that?
Yeah, and I was just looking this up. Apparently, okay, so he's quoted as saying it was 4.5 hours of makeup and getting into the costume, and they got it down to 3 hours by the end of the shoot. I'm just...
It's a long time.
Yeah. But yeah, it looks like he's having the time of his life doing that as well. I don't know. Maybe he was miserable, but he sure made it look fun.
Well, he got to play such a wacky, over-the-top character. I think I would have fun. I wouldn't have fun sitting in the makeup chair for 3 or 4 hours, but to be in that place where you get to revel in being the bad guy, man, that's fun. That's fun.
One of my favorite things about this is that the majority of the time, the costume that he's in is, what is it, like overalls or something? There's just
with a really weird shaped fat suit underneath.
Yeah, it's just, again, the word we keep coming back to is ridiculous. But it just this film enjoys its ridiculousness, and yeah, there's just something so funny about watching him, and the way he does his penguin waddle, and but then he gets so, like, his mean face, that he has his penguin, just, it's so frightening, and it's great.
I mean, it is. I wish he had a little bit more, like, a relatable, shall we say, motivations. Like, he just kind of comes across as, from the time he's a child, and he pulls the cat in to the cage that his parents have him trapped in. Like, oh, he's just a crazy person. And I'm not the biggest fan of that. I wish that there had been a little bit more, maybe, arc for the penguin. But
well, he is. His parents have put him in a cage.
Yeah. But did they put him in a cage because he's a sociopath?
Open to interpretation.
Open to interpretation.
Yeah, I don't know. It's with something like this, it's sort of playing up these sort of archetypes, and not necessarily, does I think that there's just something about the way DeVito plays it that makes him sort of sympathetic, even as he's doing horrible things. So I think that kind of makes up for that a bit. I still feel sorry for the penguin when he dies for some reason, even though he's just come off of this plan to murder
a bunch of sleeping kids.
Yeah. And not just murder them, but murder them in the most horrible way, which is to,
drown them in toxic blood.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the combination of the way DeVito plays it and the way Danny Elfman scores. But he scores, the character, as a tragic figure. And,
right.
And music goes a long way to sort of endearing towards a character.
I'm certainly not the aficionado of, film scores that you are, but I'm not going to lie. Like, I noticed Danny Elfman's score in this film quite a bit in the way that it set up the heroic moments. It set up the tense moments, the sad moments. Like, there's the scene where the penguin is walking through the cemetery and he's going to go lay flowers at his parents' grave. And he's got this limping walk. It's not even a waddle that he normally has. It's not an even pace. It's not a 1, 2, 3, 4. He's limping. He's much longer on one foot than he is on the other. And Danny Elfman hits every single step with a musical beat in that melancholy way that, I mean, Elfman's got a very unique sound. You can almost hear that it's Danny Elfman just whenever you hear anything he's done. He's got such a unique way of scoring movies. But yeah, I really noticed it this film, and he's great at what he does. He is not traditional the way somebody like a John Williams or a James Horner or
what I just thought of. It's I don't know if you watch Family Guy at all, but it's when when they do the Star Wars specials, and it's when the stormtroopers have killed John Williams.
They accidentally killed John Williams, yeah.
And he's like, now we got to do this thing with Danny Elfman. but yeah, it's and I think he was at his best during this era as well. He still writes very good music, but there was just something about that '90s era, especially when he worked with Tim Burton,
Yeah.
that was just absolutely brilliant. Putting aside all the new music, just the operatic nature of the Batman theme, which is why it's like I don't want to crap unnecessarily on the latest iterations of Batman, but like I'm not a fan of the music by the composer named Junkie XL, which what a name. I think his name is Tom Hulkenberg, who actually did a fantastic score for Mad Max Fury Road. I actually think that his style fit really well with that. But and when it comes to Batman, Danny Elfman's music is Batman for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Those two have done a lot of great things together.
Yeah.
What else to say about the Penguin, though? Just he's so gross, but
he is.
There's a certain level of I can't hate him because of the circumstances surrounding his youth. Rich parents who just discarded him, maybe largely because he was misshapen, so to speak, or didn't fit their image of what they wanted their son to be.
It's like there's no other thing that they could have thought to do with this, this baby as, monstrous as they perceived him. No, they decided to chuck him, into a river, and go underground, and God knows what happened to him. This was not a good, even remotely decent thing that, that any like good people would do. So I think that garners sympathy right there. There's any number of things they could do if they didn't want, to be responsible for, for Penguin. So
yeah. Craig says that's the thing. Even if he was born evil, he still had a really, really crappy childhood. And you're not wrong. But my counterpunch to this is the film did not do its job in telling us which was which. Like I can like the film. You guys know me. If I see a problem with it, I'm going to bring it up. Like thank God there were no soldiering scenes in this film, or don't need to do any hard science because I would tear it apart. But I really feel like the film could have done a better job of telling us, giving us a little bit more of why his parents.
But see, I don't think it's just with the kind of film it is. I think the story sets up this character with, quick visual images and the music, and it's a very operatic film versus sort of a character-driven film that's like takes you through these beats with,
They had the time to do that because I don't know if you remember, but I watched this movie today, and I remember that baby stroller is floating through the sewers for a long time at the beginning of this film, like 2.5 minutes or something like that of screen time. It gets, granted, it's the title sequence, so it's all the actors and directors and what have you, or director and actors and maybe producers that are involved in the film. All their names are coming on the screen, but the backdrop to that is the Danny Elfman score, which is great, and then a bunch of shots of a stroller floating through a sewer. I think that time could have been better utilized.
Just because you lose, if you pull that out, that doesn't automatically mean that you've gained the real estate for additional. It's all about pacing, Stephen, and that credit sequence is fulfilling a very particular function of establishing a mood, and it's I don't know. I just
you can disagree with me. That's fine. We don't always agree.
Yeah,
we don't, and that's fine. Like I see people in the chat are disagreeing with me, and that's fine. Like, I don't claim to have all the answers, but for me, I thought that was time not well used at the beginning of the film. And I feel like this movie does that a couple of times. There's a couple of places, and it's not super bad, and it doesn't break the film into something unwatchable, but I think there are a few times where things slow down and we watch a stroller float through the sewer or cats running through an alleyway next to Selena Kyle laying on the ground that just goes on a little bit too long, and it to me, it feels like it drags down the pace of the film.
No, that is brilliantly executed, and I would not cut a single frame of that scene. Definitely not.
Okay,
it's
of just cats coming out of the alleyway.
Yeah, it's building this tension of the scene. It's all about the fact that there's something mystical going on with Aemy, with the fact that they're surrounding her and they're biting her, and so it's not just her waking up and going crazy. There's something that's happened with her with the cats, and I think it's all again building a mood and building sort of tension for that moment. No, I wouldn't cut a frame out of that sequence.
Okay, hey, you could re-edit it the way you want. I can re-edit it the way I want.
Or not re-edit it at all.
Or not re-edit it at all. Nice. Gotta wait for it to come up because cat fight. I see a lot of people disagreeing with me in the chat, and that's just fine.
No, Stephen, you just like you're accusing the scene of, you let that sentence go on for too long. What you meant to say was, and that's just.
Good job, sir. Good job.
Yeah, so all right, I don't like this digression.
Okay, so yeah, we've officially gone completely off the rails at least twice already. Okay, anything else to say about Penguin, or can we move on to, like, I don't know, who else is in this movie that deserves to be talked about? I mean, we haven't really discussed Michael Keaton.
Yeah, let's.
Very little Christopher Walken.
Yeah, I was going to say Christopher Walken, but let's spend time on Michael Keaton since it's a Batman film,
a Batman movie. Michael Keaton is my Batman. He still carries it out. Although I did watch this film and go, the action scenes are not they don't quite hold up to the modern level of action scenes. But
but that's what I'm not that crazy about modern action scenes. I think that a lot of, especially modern comic books, and this is not me getting on the MCU, because I feel they definitely the same way about the DC, the sort of modern DC movies. I think there's too much involved in action sequences. I think they spend a lot of time on, these elaborate visual effects sequences with a lot of CGI, and I think that I like the sort of scaled down nature of what the action is in movies like this, where, there's one action scene that basically deals with Batman just using his, little boomerang or whatever it is, and the camera just following that around as it takes around the bad guys. And the fact that, Batman's not a very, especially in this iteration, he's not someone who does a lot of like acrobatics, because the whole nature of the costume, which I've always really liked, is the way they built it was that he actually, when he needs to turn his head, he basically needs to turn his whole body. And there's just something about the way the character carries himself in that way that I've always liked. It's sort of, he takes care of the bad guys with as few moves as possible, which I thought always made him come off as a very, sort of dangerous and,
I'm with you. I guess I just would have preferred something a little more, I don't know, kinetic or and it's a choice, he's not going for that really gritty, brutal thing like Christopher Nolan did with his Batman, and that's fine. That's an absolutely legitimate choice to make.
And which actually is funny because at the time that when Batman Begins came out, a criticism that I often heard about that movie was the sort of kinetic nature of the action sequences with like lots of like shaky cam with and quick cutting with the action sequences, and there were people who actually didn't like that. I actually thought that it worked really well for the film, but it's interesting how now we've kind of been conditioned to that kind of action choreography and editing.
Maybe that's what it is. I watch Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and I'm like, that's what I want. I want my superheroes kicking guys so hard they go flying 15 feet. Which,
well, yeah, and that's the embodiment.
Also not realistic. I get it.
But that is, especially the Winter Soldier, is the embodiment of that. The whole lots of choreography, lots of shaky cam. There's a lot of shaky cam in Winter Soldier, just the way he moves around. Especially, there's that big sequence out on the roadway, like halfway through the movie, which I love. I think it's wonderfully done, but it's definitely a very specific, certain modern style of action filmmaking, which was not the same as what they were doing in the 90s, especially the early 90s.
Yeah. I guess I just wanted a Batman that was a little bit more badass, like in and of himself, as opposed to, I mean, he could fight, but a lot of it came down to the armor and the gadgets and that sort of thing, which, that's a lot of the charm of Batman 2 is the as well. Not and Batman as well is the gadgets and the tech that he uses.
I mean, I what I liked about the way he handles himself in this movie is like when he's walking through, the bad guys and they're coming at him, and he just sort of grabs one and tosses in the other direction. I kind of like that there's minimal movement. He's able to dispatch, some of his enemies with, he's more strategic and and less just all out fighting. I think it's just a different style. I think that's demonstrated by the fact that this was a film in 1992 versus The Winter Soldier, which is a
2014.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah, so it's they had moved on to a different kind of filmmaking by then.
Yeah, but again, like these are my honest opinions. But again, having said all of that, when you say Batman, I see Michael Keaton beneath the mask to this day, and I probably always will. Yeah. I really enjoyed Christian Bale's interpretation. I think those films are better films than these films in general. Again, that's a personal taste thing, and your mileage may vary. But I still love.
Well, in fairness, I did think that for a while.
Okay.
Because especially for the first couple years after those films were out, especially for the couple of years surrounding The Dark Knight, and it may still be true. I think you'd make an argument that the Dark Knight is sort of the pinnacle of filmmaking for a Batman movie, but then I've noticed that as the years have pressed on, I've gone back to the Tim Burton films.
Well, they're not as heavy. They're not as weighty. Like the Nolan-verse films can almost drag you down a little bit. Now, I love a dark edge to my storytelling, but I'm also can fully understand the desire to have something that's a little more lighthearted, which the Burton films absolutely are.
Even when, there's, in a lot of ways, they're super, super dark, but there's sort of a mischievous, fun element to them that even when they're very dark, they're, you can crack a smile because, you'll be dealing with.
There's a penguin with a freaking rocket attached to its back.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We were going to talk,
or a poodle with a grenade in its mouth.
We were going to talk about Keaton more. I love the way this opens up, the way his character is introduced, and the way the bat signal goes up, and it's like that sort of movie pose of he sees it and then he stands up, and then it works. It's over the top, and it should be, really, really, really silly, but it works. And I'm not even gonna go into the ridiculousn's of the fact that Bruce Wayne has his own personal bat signals that get triggered. It's like, is somebody gonna notice that?
I had that very thought while it's going up. I'm like, nobody does this, right?
But that's the thing, though. That's the type of movie this is. It's like sort of
don't
playing
think too hard about it.
Yeah, exactly. It works because it works, and but it's funny if we're talking about security. There's another. This was probably one of my favorite things about the way Keaton plays Batman, especially in this film, is he's actually quite funny at times, because while we're talking about sort of the security of all that, he makes a comment to Alfred later on in the movie where Alfred says something. He's like, really, security? Who was the one who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? I'm standing there, and then, oh, hi, Vicky. And then later on, when he's trying to detach parts of the Batmobile and he's pressing the button and it's not working, and he goes, oh, that's funny. And then about a second later, he's like, okay, now I'm a little worried.
Yeah, that sort of downplayed.
Yeah.
You get to see behind the mask just a little bit.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed stuff like that with him. And then there's stuff with his interactions with Selina where, she's having, sort of her moment of sort of saying, sort of more Catwoman-y type stuff to him. And he's like, you got kind of a dark side, don't you?
No darker than yours.
Yeah. So yeah, he got some great stuff in this movie. And so even if he, if you feel like maybe he didn't get, as much time to shine because, the villains are kind of
right,
are in the spotlight for this film, I still think he made a lot of good use of the time on screen that he had.
He's great while he's there.
Yeah.
I could have used a little bit more of him personally, but you would have to be cutting something away from another character to do that, and I'm not willing to really do that. I think the sort of villainous characters got the time they needed, and there's not much fat to trim there.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you would get rid of other than certain, extended scenes taking place with cats in alleyways or strollers floating through sewers, and we've already emphatically decided that we can't do that. So we just gotta take what we got and move on. You're right. Guilty Undertaker says Michael Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer did have great chemistry. I mean, look at those two people, though, and it's not hard to have great chemistry.
I would give anything. I know, and first of all, I know that there's talk about, I guess in the Flash movie or something, they're bringing Keaton in to play. I guess it's going to deal with, sort of what the Marvel universe is doing now with a multiverse or something like that. I don't know. I haven't read up much on it, so I guess Keaton is coming back in some form to play a version of his character. But you know what? I don't care that it's been 30 years, and and the actors would have to play obviously older versions of their characters. I seriously and even though we've talked about whether or not Tim Burton is past his prime or whatever, you know what? I don't care. Give me a freaking Tim Burton movie with Michael Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer playing Batman and Catwoman, and just do it.
I would watch the crap out of that. I would watch the crap out of that.
Yeah. Especially I want the fulfillment of the promise that is the final shot of this movie. When Catwoman pops up in frame. I was so looking forward to what lied ahead with that character especially. Yeah.
She had 17-year-old Steven paying attention. I'll just say that much.
It's so funny. it's so hilarious because, and I'll delve back into my sort of childhood memories at this point. This was back, how old was I? Like, I was like, I want to say 8 years old. So this was when little John had not yet acknowledged that it was okay for an interest in girls. This was still in the girls have cooties stage,
Yeah.
which of course,
never went through that stage. Never. Girls never had cooties. I always liked girls.
But it was funny because I think I got into a bit of a fight with one of my friends who she had made some kind of comment like on the schoolyard playground about how I was interested in Catwoman or something, because I was still at that age where I wasn't acknowledging that I was in any way interested in girls. That I remember that was a source of contention for a day or two between the two of us. But if only I'd been willing to let the truth in a little bit at that point, I would not have complained one little bit.
The truth will set you free, John.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so no more comments. I think we've made the
we're not here to objectify anyone, but we can appreciate.
Yes.
Dude, we've got like less than 15 minutes left in the stream.
Yeah, let's give some time to Christopher Walken.
Yeah, let's do that. And also, I do want to throw it to the chat too and say, chat, if there's anything that you would like us to talk about that we haven't covered, if it's a line, if it's a scene, if it's a character, please bring it up. Christopher Walken, go.
There's a part in this movie at the party or at the ball or whatever when Bruce is like, you almost made a lunatic or something to that effect, the mayor of Gotham, and Christopher Walken says something about it doesn't matter who's the mayor on the soul of Gotham, and Bruce says it matters to me, and Christopher Walken just looks at him and goes, yawn.
Yeah.
I so missed that on prior viewings.
Good stuff, though, man.
Like, oh my God, that's great.
I think this was now he's obviously been acting for a long time, but I think this is the first movie that I watched where I was aware of Christopher Walken being, like, this was my introduction to him as an actor. I may have seen him in something else before that, but it wasn't the type of thing that made an impression. But like the Max Schreck character made a heck of an impression on me, even though he wasn't Catwoman, he wasn't the Penguin. He was ostensibly not a supervillain, but he's like the biggest bad guy. Like, he's got no reason to be a bad guy, but he's awful.
Yeah, and like when I was younger, I didn't get any of the stuff about like what his big project was about, sucking power from the city and all that, because that stuff kind of went over my head as a kid. I just got that he was up to no good. So it's interesting watching this as I'm older and looking at stuff like that. We'll talk about Alfred for just a little bit before we wrap up. And it's interesting that this is like, he's playing over the top, but he's not like playing into the caricature of Christopher Walken either. Like he has often done in years since in certain things. He's not taking those like extra pauses between words that we love him for. But he's so despicable. And he is like the embodiment of the crooked politician.
Yeah, they really do have like, Nessie puts it a really good way.
Yeah,
because he is the monster in the film. He is the big bad guy, and he has no reason to be. Like, he's already rich, but like, I always think of that Mr. Burns quote. Yes, I'm rich, but I'd trade it all for just a little bit more. And he's that type. Like, why? Why? Why do you need this? that sort of like extreme greed, and it destroys him in the end. It destroys everyone around him, and it makes him makes enemies of everyone around him. So yeah, but geez, like Christopher Walken can just play that type of asshole character so well.
Yeah, and his whole thing with Selena when he like fakes her out, she's like, it's not like you can just kill me. And he's like, actually, it's a lot like that. And he goes, and then he, does that laughing, oh, it's all a joke. And then he just viciously pushes her out. And just the way he plays that character, it's so chilling. And so, as you say, he doesn't really have a reason. Like, he wants to leave a legacy for his son, which, is still more about him than even his son, because he's very concerned with legacy, but it's his own legacy.
Right. That is one of the inconsistent things in the film. Like, I hated him so much when his son was like, "Dad, run," and he runs. But then at the end of the film, he does say, "Take me, not my son," which is like maybe the one redeeming thing he does in the whole film. And it's not, a parent trading themselves for their child. I mean, like, that's just kind of a normal human thing. I don't even see that as being heroic.
Well, on the one thing, I think early in the film, he's like, he doesn't take a second to think of it. He's sort of gut instinct, as soon as Chip says that, is to go ahead and run. And second of all, I don't look at it as he's actually being a good father towards the end of the film when he decides to give himself up. He's been going on and on about how, Chip is his legacy and how, what's going to care for it. I don't think that's concern for his son. I think it's concern for his own legacy.
Right.
And that if Chip goes, then that's the end of the line. And for him, he's got nobody to leave anything to, so his name isn't going to continue to live on. So
it was a very Max focused thing.
Yeah.
But Christopher Walken does it fantastically, believably, like dirtbag politician or like corrupt corporatist industrialist. He kills it. And this back when Shrek was a bad guy.
Yeah. Or
he became a lovable ogre.
I know. I had to do a double take every time I've said Shrek. In this, I'm like, God, that made it was easier to say with a straight face in the years before Shrek the Ogre, and now I just think of Mike Myers.
So yes, let's talk about Michael Gough as Alfred for a moment.
He's Alfred.
He is too. Like, I saw somebody else say Michael Caine is their Alfred, and Taker says will always be the best Alfred. Like, I respectfully disagree. We all have our own interpretations. Like, Keaton is my Batman. Yours can be Affleck or Adam West or Christian Bale or whoever you want. But Michael Gough is mine, and he is actually the only character that is consistent throughout all four of these first Batman films. He is Alfred to Val Kilmer and George Clooney's Batman as well.
Which I think counted for a lot, because he was kind of he's a through line throughout those movies. It's what made sort of the series continue on, even when there was a changeover style, from the first two films to those second two films. And also, it's just the fact that I grew up with him as Alfred. I mean, a lot of the stuff comes down to, what you grew up with. It's like James Bond. It's usually, my dad grew up with, not Sean Connery, but why am I drawing a blank? Roger Moore. and so he's always been very partial to that version of the character. And I grew up with GoldenEye and Pierce Brosnan, so
Right.
I've always been partial to that version of Bond. And I think so. I think it's sort of the same with Batman. And Michael Gough was Alfred for so many of those years, of the Batman franchise. And even like, I remember commercials like the original Batman VHS tape opens with a Pepsi commercial. It's either Pepsi or Coca-Cola, I don't remember, with Michael Gough as Alfred, and ends with him taking his summer and going, and that was sort of just iconic. So it's stuff like that sort of sticks in my mind. So when I think Alfred, I do very much picture him always.
Same. Yep.
And he's a lot of fun in this one too. The part where he says, "I have an invitation from that odious Mr. Shrek for this party." It's like, and no, I'm not.
The RSVP in the resoundingly negative, and I love odious Mr. Shrek. Like that's another one that just odious.
And then he tears it up, and then Bruce is like, actually, Selena Kyle might be there, and just the way Alfred looks at him like I just tore it up. So yeah, he's a lot of fun, and like he was the bright spot in the other two films, even whatever shots you want to take at those, he was still really good.
Like I still got a soft spot for Batman Forever. Like It's not a good movie, but I still have a soft spot for it. Jim Carrey's Riddler is so ridiculous. I just can't hate it.
Well, again, and Jim Carrey, he owned the world for a number of years there, and this was during that era. So, of course, I absolutely adored his Riddler, and it was a fun movie, and at the time, that's that hit the spot for me. Like I said, I was only 11 years old, so I think I was very much probably the target audience for a movie like that. So I don't have hard feelings towards Batman Forever like a lot of people do.
Batman and Robin is a bad movie.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
I knew that even as a young teenager seeing it, I was like, oh, that's not good.
Yep. So and you're right though. Michael Gough is the highlight of both of those films. Like he keeps them his character is consistent throughout all of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is 8:00 Eastern, John, or right close to it. So I think we ought to wrap it up.
I know, which is funny because we've talked about a lot, but I also feel like there still would be so much more to talk about this film, but we might just go around in circles anyway. So
yeah,
but I'll just say again, this movie is so weird and grotesque,
ridiculous,
and funny, and just I just love it to pieces. It's remained my favorite, definitely my favorite Batman film, and I would say my favorite comic book film, just because it's a completely out there vision. It's its own thing. I even feel like it's even that's why I say it's a great companion piece to the first Batman, because even though it's technically a sequel, I don't necessarily. They also feel slightly disconnected in a way, because I feel like, especially the setting of the first Batman movie, it had very much that same Tim Burton Gothic look to it, but there's a lot of the set design in the first movie that feels like it's trying to be a mixture between that sort of Art Deco look and the real world as well. This one is shot all on a very exaggerated backlot that feels like it's almost a fairy tale world in the way that it's depicted, and so it almost feels like it's taking place in a slightly different Gotham City than the first film. and I like that about it. And I think that style was very much adopted in the animated series as well. But yeah, I love this just for how crazy of a movie it is.
I'm with you.
Right. And
I will say, Greg or Craig, thank you very much. That's a very kind sentiment.
yeah,
This is
thank
what
you.
we do every week. This is our thing. We talk nerd stuff, and we do try to be like respectful and inclusive. And yeah, come back. You'll enjoy it. So, yeah, John, I love this film too. Maybe not the same way you do. A lot of it is probably more based on the nostalgia rather than going like, oh, it's a great movie. No, it was great for me at the time when it came out, and it still informs my view of Batman to this day. So yeah, good stuff. Good movie. Glad we had a chance to talk about it. I'm not sure what our next retro review will be, but it'll be a little bit down the road. However,
I don't know. Highlander made a really good showing.
It really did. So when you do the math, Highlander lost by 1 vote.
Yeah.
1 vote. So we'll probably do Highlander next. And then we'll put another poll out but Highlander will not be next week. Next week will be WandaVision. We'll be wrapping up the season, talking about all the ways the show has blown our minds, touched us, made us tear up maybe a little bit. Yeah. So come back next Sunday, same bat time, same bat channel, and we'll be talking about the real
WandaVision.
WandaVision. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. John, I know you're kind of off for a couple of weeks, but when you come back, what film are you guys going to be covering?
Well, actually, our first episode back will be an introductory episode, which we've actually already recorded. It's pretty much Aemy and I just sort of setting the stage for what the podcast is going to be. And we talked about a lot of random topics. I think for a while there, we ragged on Netflix about, their sort of streaming model and what they choose to renew and what they choose not to renew, things of that nature. And we just sort of bounced around talking about a bunch of different stuff. But then our first official discussion the week after that will be for The Wizard of Oz. And then after that will be the first installment of the Nightly Hour, where we'll talk about Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, with Lady Triple. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to The Wizard of Oz, man. That's another weird, wild movie, and I'm looking forward to.
I think we were really happy that worked out, because originally we just decided to do that movie because we wanted to tackle some older films, but then once we kind of worked out the scheduling of when we wanted to start the podcast, it just worked out wonderfully that's the first one, because even though it's not like The Wizard of Oz wasn't actually the first movie ever made, but I think for a lot of people it kind of feels like that first film experience that you have as a child, and especially with the whole thing where it goes from black and white to color, it just sort of feels like the original film in a lot of ways.
Right. Good stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. I also know that Nessie has got a Bleep the Patriarchy coming up soon, where she's going to be talking with Kelly, Jaded Redhead, about boats, life on boats, and like the superstitions surrounding women on boats and whatnot. So Nessie, if you drop that in the chat when you guys are going to do your next stream, I'll post that up. And as far as what's coming after WandaVision for us, I don't know. John and Nessie and I will get together soon, and we will try to lay out some
staff meeting
and lay out some of our schedule going forward. But yeah, okay, there it is. March 10th will be the next Bleep the Patriarchy over on Unspun Yarn about ship life. Looking forward to that. And if you missed it on the mid-roll, I'll say it again. I intend to stream Baldur's Gate 3 tomorrow, but after this stream, I'm going to, I'll be out of pocket for a little bit, but I will be jumping onto our Slack group to have a conversation about what character to play. So I'll see you guys there. Anything else, John?
No, I think that wraps up. And thank you for a wonderful conversation about this movie, Stephen. I've been looking forward to this one for some time. And yeah, I love that we had some points of disagreement on this because
sure.
I like
for good conversation, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a good time. Like if we just agreed, we'd be like, "That's awesome." Yeah, it was awesome. Move on to the next thing. Like,
yeah, it's a good thing that nobody's channel is like that. No, it's Aemy and I don't agree on everything over on Joel.
Voice of Geekdom says, "New I Know That Nerd episodes." Okay, buddy, you just put yourself on the hook for that. So, hashtag Dan on IKTN soon. You got nobody to blame for yourself for that. Oh, and then before I forget, I just remembered I will be on Geeksteria this Friday evening to talk about The Expanse again.
Dan, I expect you to ride into your I Know That Nerd on coconuts.
On coconuts. It's the only acceptable way. Yeah. So, okay, y'all, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation about a movie that it's got its issues, but I can still love it all the same. Like, maybe, John, you don't have quite as many issues as I did, but you still loved it all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to know. Good to know. But, so, yeah, Dan, you're on the hook. I've also recently talked with another person who is well known in the fan community about doing it. I Know That Nerd with her soon. So, got a couple of people lined up for that. The only thing with the I Know That Nerds is that John and Nessie aren't there for them, so I try to schedule them for when Nessie is already working anyway, and then, yeah, John gets a week off. But thanks, friends, for coming by. Again, like, subscribe. I know most of you probably have done that a long time ago, but that's how we'll close it off this week. Hit the like and subscribe and ring that bell for notifications. Anyway, I digress. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We will see you next week. And until then, you know what it is. Peace and be excellent.